I'm Caroline Hyde. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, the resistance continues as tech closes ranks on the travel ban. At issue, the fate of the H-1B visa and America's ability to recruit top talent from overseas. Our panel debates. Plus, 2 days before the biggest one-day sporting event in the US, the world of daily fantasy sports is also hoping to score a touchdown. The CEO of DraftKings gives us his take on who wins Super Bowl 51. And it's complicated. Snap Inc. reveals its complex relationship with Google as both friend and foe. We'll break down the tie-up. First to our lead, a solid jobs report for the US. Employers adding 227,000 jobs in January, the biggest gain in 4 months. But the US labor force is under closer scrutiny than usual thanks to President Trump's America First hiring agenda, and reports that his next executive order related to immigration could take aim at work visas. Now, the tech industry in particular relies heavily on the H-1B visa, meant to grant temporary immigration status to highly skilled foreign workers. Critics say there's a way for tech companies, particularly IT sourcing firms, to hire cheap workers from overseas. Michael Solomon is founder of 10X Management, a recruitment firm that hires for the likes of Google and eBay. Also with us, former Y Combinator partner Haj Tagger, now CEO of TripleByte, which helps the likes of Dropbox, Stripe hire top tech talent. And I want to start with you, Haj, because the criticism is there of the H-1B visa. It's misused. Cheap labour programme is what Donald Trump himself called it on the campaign trail. You've actually written in The Entrepreneur about this at length. And is it the case that it's being misused to a certain extent?
Yes. I think there's clear evidence that the minimum wage requirement under the H-1B at the moment, which is around $60,000 a year, is well below the average salary that software engineers, particularly in the Bay Area, particularly in the technology industry, would be earning at these companies. So there is a great business model here for the outsourcing companies. They can sponsor lots of these applications, bring people in on these wages, but this harms the Bay Area in particular because the odds of the companies out here being able to win a H-1B sponsorship go dramatically down.
And so, Michael, there's the argument to a certain extent that actually startups looking for talent are drowned out. They're not able to find the talent through H-1B visas. But your concern here is that if we lifted that minimum wage, we'll actually see a skyrocketing in the amount that are being paid at the moment and maybe pricing some companies out potentially?
Well, I think that if you're going to compare what a startup has to go through versus one of the big tech companies, you're going to see a very different look at the kind of people that they can hire. And as soon as you work to level this playing field, you're really going to see a big challenge ahead of us. And I think that, overall, part of what's not being said in this conversation is this is not just about tech companies. The entire economy is filled with companies that are all technology companies. That may not be their core product, but they all need great tech talent. And if we throttle the pipeline that's bringing a lot of these people in, we're going to see wages for those people rise, and we're going to see a real shortage for companies that need that kind of high-skilled talent.
So, Haj, there's a case of throttling here being made by Michael, but you feel that there is a way of changing the H-1B visa that could work to everyone's advantage?
Yeah, so I think Michael had a couple of good points there. Like one, in terms of sort of startups and big companies, they obviously don't have the same financial resources. But if we look at the specific proposals that are being put out there, the minimum wage requirement being up to either $100,000 a year or $130,000 a year. At TripleByte, we have a lot of accurate data on how much engineers in the technology industry are being paid. And that's well within the range that both startups and big companies are already paying their H-1B workers. So I don't think you'd see startups being disadvantaged when those are the minimum wage requirements put in place. The throttling and different industries is a fair point, and I think these are the kinds of issues that should be debated. I think the idea of a minimum wage requirement for the H-1B is valid, and adjusting that potentially by industry and carving out different requirements for different types of work is something that is worth discussing and exploring more.
Michael, it's interesting. I was reading 150,000 new jobs a year are created in tech. Well, do you really need 85,000 visas to help fill that? Is really the talent pool in the United States coming out of the university so small that you need that 85,000 to fill the 150 places?
Sadly, it is. There's about, of that 150,000, there's a shortage of about 110,000 a year. We're seeing and going to continue to see until our country makes it a priority to educate people differently, starting in in grammar school, middle school, and high school, that we're going to continue to fall short on this. And I just want to say I really agree with what Haj is saying about a minimum. There's no downside to that. That ensures that the jobs are going to the highly qualified people, and it's not taking away a job that could be done from someone here. So I just wanted to add that I agree with that point wholeheartedly.
So it sounds like both Michael and yourself, Haj, are really talking about the need for this to be debated, not suddenly rushed through in any particular way. We need people at the table discussing this with Donald Trump and indeed the Congress and the Senate. But what about your client's response thus far? Not only to that, but the Trump travel ban as well. Are we starting to see people fearing to come and find jobs in the US?
Yeah, unfortunately, again, at Tripwire, we absolutely are. So we get applications from engineers across the world, specifically from ones that have special visa arrangements with the US. So Australia, Canada are both examples of countries where they have visas that make it easier to get into the US to work. And we are already seeing candidates begin to pause their job search. So these are countries not affected by the travel ban, but they are worried about moving here while there's so much uncertainty.
Michael, same question to you. Are you seeing a concern from people looking for jobs within the US, and indeed your clients? Are they looking to hire outside of the United States? Maybe we'll see more offshoots of Microsoft, for example, in Canada because they can't get the talent here in the US?
Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely seeing this and have a situation right now where somebody's trying to rush through a visa for fear that it's not going to be available in a few months, and that is somebody coming from a non-banned country. I think that there's fear and panic sort of going around everywhere, and I think that if we don't come up with a better way to approach this, we're going to see industry-wide and economy-wide problems when we don't have enough people and people are no longer choosing to come here to innovate. I mean, there's a story floating around now about a gentleman from India who could not get a visa and ended up forming what is now a $7 billion company in India because he couldn't do it here. Of course, there are a lot of factors that might have been different had he tried to do it here, but do we really want to drive those kinds of businesses and those kinds of entrepreneurs from our shores? I think we really have to look at this very closely because innovation hubs are popping up around the world and people will go where the talent is.
Well, certainly notes of caution and warning to the executive in the United States. Thank you. We'll see whether the executive order does indeed take on board some viewpoints of yours. Michael Solomon of 10X Management in New York and Haj Tagger, CEO of TripleByte. Thank you very much, both gentlemen, for your time. Now, coming up, after a batch of tech earnings, a strong trend is emerging. Investment spending is on the rise. We'll dig into what that means for the tech giants. This is Bloomberg. A stock we're watching. Tableau shares popped in Friday trading. The maker of data visualization software reported quarterly revenue that exceeded estimates. The latest numbers encouraging investors who had seen growth underperform in 2 of the past 4 quarters. Now, CEO Adam Selipsky is trying to transition the company to cloud-based subscriptions. Now, the company also announced Dan Miller as its new executive vice president of worldwide sales. Important because the position had been empty for a year. Now, staying with earnings, large internet companies are increasing their R&D spending. Companies like Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet all disclose this trend in their quarterly reports. So what's behind this uptick? Joining us now is Mark Mahaney, Managing Director of Internet Companies at RBC Capital Market. Mark, always fabulous to have you on the show. And so you noticed this trend.
Yes.
And I wanted to get your perspective on why the investment suddenly.
Yeah, you're right. So Facebook, just to get the numbers out, guided for about 50% growth in operating expenses this year. Last year was 40%, so that's a big step up. Amazon's guiding for margins to be down. They're citing things like India, video content, Amazon Fresh, a series of other infrastructure initiatives behind fulfillment. And then Google hasn't given so much guidance, but their margins were down year over year, a little bit of a surprise. Maybe there was a one-time item, maybe there wasn't. All of these companies are almost certainly accelerating their spend because they see new growth opportunities. For Amazon, the big ones are Fresh. The big one is getting more and more video content into their customers' hands, and it's really building out the Alexa ecosystem. Yeah. Facebook's making some bets on VR and AR, virtual reality and adjusted reality, augmented reality. So they all have new areas that they want to invest in. Maybe the point is they've reached a point of scale, but they haven't reached a point of maturity, and they still feel that there's a lot of new investment areas for them.
You mentioned operating margins both of Amazon and Alphabet there. I want to bring you to the operating margin of Facebook at the moment because it's been on a relative upward trend. If you dive into my Bloomberg, this is a great piece from Bloomberg Intelligence, in fact. You can go into the BI ticker on any particular company, and here you'll see that it's 63.53 is where we currently stand in terms of operating income margin. Is that going to decrease for Facebook, therefore, and to what sort of level?
Probably not. They can probably keep it where it is, but they have the same problem that Google's had over the last 10 years. Their core business is extremely high margin. Google, there's no business as high a margin as search. And for Facebook, that probably was the case too. So most things that they go into will probably be somewhat dilutive, but we don't think dramatically dilutive. The opposite end of the spectrum is Amazon, whose core business is lower than just about any other business's margin. So anything they go into going forwards is likely to be accretive to margins. That's the wonderful shift towards cloud computing for them. But for Facebook, despite what I said, most new businesses are going to be lower margins. We think they'll just be a shade lower. We don't think there's a dramatic negative inflection in Facebook's margins.
Okay, so still enough to whet the investor appetite. Let's flick it on to next week because Twitter, the company that we all love to hate, it would seem. And I've got another chart from the Bloomberg at the moment really showing how much we've seen Twitter user growth slow down. In the blue that you're seeing monthly active users, 263 million in the mobile space. If you add on the white, you get the monthly active users overall. We're just at 317 million. Is that going to increase in any way? We've just plateaued when it comes to Twitter's users?
So that's the big concern here about Twitter. It's not only that the users pretty clearly have plateaued. In the U.S., we're looking at about 67 million. In their most mature market, 67 million users that really haven't changed that much. Okay, they've gone up 1 or 2 million over the last year, but that's barely. And the revenue growth is now about 6-7%. I mean, it's almost X growth this next year, or this year, 2017. We think there's a reasonable chance their revenue declines. So that doesn't give them much cushion from an investor perspective. People don't want to see in a big investment cycle. Look, if you grow like Facebook, Google, and Amazon, you can have a major investment cycle. I think the market's willing to do that, but not if you're Twitter, which causes this real problem in the stock. Growth slows down, no room for investments. Where does the stock go? Usually down.
So this sort of level that we're seeing, 317, we're likely to be at about that sort of level when we get the numbers out this week, you think?
We think so. It's also, we've had a lot of executive departures recently, like in the last 2 months. Usually executives don't leave right before a big positive quarter. You notice that? But here's going to be a great test. We've had a president now who clearly came to power in part because of the use of this platform. So if there's ever going to be one quarter in which the users pop up, this should be it. And if they don't, it raises real questions about if there's any use case for Twitter beyond the core that it's already developed over the last 4 years.
And is that really the paradox here, that it hasn't came from Donald Trump's love of the service?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you couldn't have. The Twitter challenge is that you can. It's great to go to Twitter to see Donald Trump's comments, but President Trump's comments, but you can see them anywhere.
Yeah.
And so maybe in a way they've lost the exclusivity. They're such a big broadcast network that they have lost the direct appeal to their site. Also, the service has never really gotten mainstream enough. And I'm careful when I say that. 320 million users is a lot of users worldwide.
But it's mainly journalists and celebrities and talking to one another.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Well, certainly you must be right because we haven't seen any growth over the last year, and we've seen the revenue growth really taper off. And you know, when tech companies go X growth at still relatively high multiples, which is what this name has, usually the stocks work very poorly.
We will watch that stock closely next week, and I'm sure you will be too. All eyes on that particular earning coming up. It's always great to get your perspective.
Thank you,
Last week and next, Mark Mahaney, Managing Director at RBC Capital Markets. Thank you so much. Now coming up, the countdown of Super Bowl 51 is on, and DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins tells us which team his sports tech entertainment platform sees coming out on top. This is Bloomberg. Apple will begin assembling iPhones in India by the end of April. This according to a regional minister who said the work will be done in Bangalore. Now, Apple has been ramping up its focus on India, which is the fastest growing major smartphone market, as the company's growth, slows elsewhere. The move could also be a way to score brownie points with India's government, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi touts a so-called Make in India agenda. Super Bowl 51 is just around the corner. The annual championship game is the biggest event for the National Football League. One company that depends heavily on the NFL is the daily fantasy sports platform, DraftKings. We checked in with DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins ahead of the big game and asked, which team the platform had winning the Super Bowl. Take a listen.
It's an interesting question because fantasy points typically reward offense. There is a defensive position that you choose, but it's one of only several on the roster. So if you look at it, I hate to admit because we're headquartered in Boston, but Atlanta actually had a few extra fantasy points and had some bigger performances. But if you factor in the defense, I think New England's got the edge and will probably win. But I think it's going to be a great game with lots of scoring, and it could go either way. So it's going to be pretty exciting to watch.
But what about commercials coming from you, DraftKings? Are you putting marketing budget to work? Because there was a lot spent this time last year by both you and FanDuel, who you're merging with. Is that being cut back a little bit this year?
Yeah, we didn't do as much advertising this year. We've never done a Super Bowl commercial. For us, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's the end of the season, and we really like to advertise the beginning of the NFL season so we can get people to play and hopefully play for the whole season. But last year, we did a tremendous amount of advertising. Being 2015, last season. And then this season, we did some, but not nearly as much.
And for what reason are you curtailing that back?
You know, I think last time we got some blowback that we just kind of went a little overboard, and I think people were getting sick of the commercials, and it was hard to say because we were certainly acquiring a lot of new customers, so there was a business benefit, but we felt like after such a heavy advertising year, it might make sense to not go so heavy the following season.
And now you're looking for new customers in new regions. You've got a license for Malta. You're looking into Europe. This gives you access to Germany. You're already in the United Kingdom. Can you give us a sense of how quickly you'll start to move into Europe?
So we're very pleased that we were just granted a controlled skill gaming license from Malta. And the way it works in Europe is if you're a member of the EU and you license a company, then that company can operate under that license anywhere as long as that place that they're operating doesn't explicitly have their own set of regulations. So there's a number of countries in Europe that don't actually regulate the skill gaming category explicitly. So our Maltese skill game license allows us to enter any of those countries, and Germany, naturally being the largest market in Europe, is going to be our first one after Malta.
Can you give us a date of when you go?
Going to be by end of the quarter. We're going to have an announcement soon on the exact date, but it'll definitely be by the end of Q1.
So 57 million people playing fantasy sports. Where is your market share at the moment?
Well, we're still pretty small relative to that. We have about 7 million registered users. About 40% of those customers have played pay games. So we're still relatively small, and that's one of the reasons we're so excited about the future. I think that the next wave is going to be about capturing that group that want to play with friends.
Talking about bringing in friends and the next stage, you're going to be merging with FanDuel. That is still going through antitrust regulation at the moment. Can you give us an update of where you stand in terms of that sort of regulatory clearance?
Well, we're still working to get that through the FTC, and that's something that I shouldn't probably get too into because the lawyers will get upset with me, but I can tell you that it's been really, really well received by consumers. Everybody's excited because there have been so many things that we've been asked for by our customers, things that we want to do, innovative things that I think are really going to transform the game and make it so much better and so much more exciting, and we just haven't had the resources to do it. And in the meantime, both companies have been double paying for so many things, certainly recently a lot of lawyers in that category, and it just doesn't really make sense when you know that you could be driving innovation faster, you know that you have customers that are desperately seeking experiences, and you want to get them done. That's not the hard part, is figuring out what to do. The hard part is just having the resources to execute, and what gets me excited about the potential for this merger is that we'll be able to deliver a better product to the customer than we would be able to as single companies.
Those legal fees, as doubling up as they might be needed, of course, to persuade that you won't own too much of the digital fantasy space. I mean, how much of the market would you own together? About 95% or something? Or is there not? How are you convincing that you won't be just too strong in this category?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's about 57 million people playing fantasy sports, and the majority of those people are playing on platforms like ESPN and Yahoo and CBS and NFL.com, and we're small relative to those. While the daily version of the game is relatively new and Yahoo is the only one in that group I mentioned that offers it, there's no reason that those other companies won't jump into it as soon as it gets bigger. So for us, we feel like right now with 7 million registered users, knowing that there's another 50 out there, that we're pretty small potatoes. And We want to compete with those big companies. We don't want to be a small piece of it. We want to be, a big piece of that 57 million playing, and we think we can get it even bigger. 57 is still only about half the number of people that claim to be sports fans in the United States. So there's a lot of room, I think, with innovation and coming up with new types of creative contests to be able to reach a broader and broader audience.
That was DraftKings CEO Jason Robins. Coming up, earnings from 3 of the largest tech companies in the world and a splashy $3 billion IPO. We'll break down everything you need to know about this week in tech. That's next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can now listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the US on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde, and it's been a full week since President Trump signed controversial executive orders on travel into the US. This Friday, Trump held a meeting with his advisory group of CEOs as he seeks to continue to pursue his pro-growth agenda, despite criticism that his immigration policies could hinder it. Tesla CEO Elon Musk addressed these concerns in a statement, adding he planned to bring them up with the president at the event. So what went down behind closed doors? Joining us now from Washington, Kevin Cirilli, Bloomberg's chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, give us the inside track here. I know taxes were looked at, but was immigration?
Yes, it was. And of course, a lot of these companies and CEOs, not only from Silicon Valley, but also from the business world and more traditional Wall Street, Main Street type of nexus, they have severe concerns, not just because they're hearing complaints from their corporate board members, but also because of grassroots communities. And I can tell you that the sources I'm speaking with, familiar with this meeting, tell me that those concerns were made clear at this meeting. Of course, there was some controversy with the Uber CEO saying that he would not attend, he would drop out of the advisory board. But, this is an interesting dynamic because quite frankly, these CEOs spent the last 8 years complaining about President Obama's over-regulatory policies. However, now they're facing criticism from potential consumers, not only in Silicon Valley, but also all throughout the country, who are concerned and disagree with the president's policies, but they still need to engage. And that's the tightrope that a lot of these folks like Elon Musk are having to walk.
And certainly we were hearing that the head of Blackstone, who seems to be the leader of this particular advisory panel, he himself was talking about the fact that Uber's CEO wasn't there and why Travis had decided to step down, and difficult situation he was in. Are there any other difficult situations? You said there's a balancing act for Elon Musk. Are any other CEOs actually under pressure here, do you think?
Well, look at Walmart. I mean, we're just around the corner from a major tax reform package that's going to come out of Silicon Valley, and the groundwork on Capitol Hill already being laid. Folks like Gary Cohn, Stephen Mnuchin, working with people like House Financial Services Committee Chairman Jeb Hensarling on how to craft that policy. Speaker Paul Ryan obviously leading the charge on that in the House. And Walmart, of course, is against, as one of the largest retailers, the border adjustment tax. And so not only does this impact immigration policy, but also, of course, the border adjustment tax, a huge opposition mounting from the retail industry. All of that is brewing. I can tell you that was brought up at the meeting earlier today at the White House as well.
But of course, the overarching focus for President Trump is jobs, job creation, though, particularly in manufacturing. This is something that Elon Musk has. He actually can say, look, I make jobs in America with the likes of Tesla and robots and people working in harmony together. What about the tech situation of the job creation?
Well, he wants a carbon tax. I mean, he has pushed for a flat tax on carbon, and that was something he brought up just the other week in his meeting with President Trump. And so, with Elon Musk in particular, he, I think, is one of the folks who has really carefully navigated not being perceived as being overly effusive, if you will, of being a part of the president's economic council and advisor, if you will, informally. He's someone who has walked that line because at every single meeting he's risen criticism against some of the immigration policy, for example, against environmental policies. So he's walked that line perhaps more so than other CEOs, to be quite frankly.
Kevin Cerulli, can't thank you enough. Every time I turn on Bloomberg TV, there you are with yet another great interview. Bloomberg's chief Washington correspondent, thank you for staying late for us. Now, earlier on Bloomberg Markets, we spoke with Bloomberg News executive editor for global technology, Tom Giles, and Bloomberg Technology, Sarah Fryer, about President Trump's recent executive orders and other tech highlights this week.
We're really starting to get a strong picture of what Trump's orders are going to be like. What is he going to be like as president? Very much like the Trump we saw before the election took place. And tech has had different reactions to it. The travel ban sparked a very, very strong reaction across the technology sector, as you've been following every day here on Bloomberg. Travis Kalanick, at the outset, he was criticized for not having as strong of a reaction as some people would have liked. He was viewed, because he was part of the council, he was viewed as being a little bit too far in Trump's corner. And that really raised the hackles of a lot of his drivers, a lot of his customers.
Delete Uber trending?
Delete Uber started trending. Everything he did in response to this was criticized. He could absolutely do no right whatsoever. And so, very last minute, yesterday, Uber revealed that Travis would not be part of this council. He would not be coming to Washington. He made the realization that it was more in his interest to leave the council and save the business that he's been losing. I mean, we've learned that 200,000 people deleted their Uber accounts. Wow. That's significantly higher than what happens in any given week. Yeah. Now, they did get net adds, so they were still growing, but 200,000 is a big number, and that's something that Uber was really listening to. I was in an Uber car last night. My driver, unprompted, told me, I'm leaving Uber, wow. I'm going to join Lyft, and it's because of the politics and the optics of Travis being part of this. And I asked him, well, what about him leaving the council? He said, doesn't matter, I'm concerned about the political ramifications.
Too little, too late, and many feel that actually Elon Musk going there at least can take some of the criticism from the technology, from Silicon Valley to Donald Trump. That was sort of the clouds, I mean, the silver lining in technology that hit Silicon Valley this week. Sarah, the company you follow so closely, Snap, the owner of Snapchat, it was official.
They went public. Their filings that have been private for so long were exposed. We got to see their revenue numbers, their lack of profits. In fact, their loss was greater than their revenue. We got to see their user growth, and we got to see how it's been slowing a little bit. And
158 million.
158 million.
For us. It's less than Instagram.
It's less than Instagram. It's more than Twitter. It's a healthy company. I mean, this is a company that's had an impact on how we communicate. We're sending things more visually now. We're talking to each other in a way that's a lot more raw and natural, not the polished images we have on Instagram, right? Snap is much more about...
I like to say that you're embracing both Tom and I in the view that we use Snapchat.
I actually know how to use Snapchat. I'm one of the people who's not their target
honorary
audience.
millennials here.
But that's what they're trying to do, is educate, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting from the filing is that they're setting themselves up to not be compared to Facebook and Twitter. Now, I don't know if they're gonna get away with that, but they certainly don't want to frame themselves in the same way. They're not trying to conquer the world with their user growth. They say they only want to focus on developed countries with healthy mobile ecosystems where their video and image heavy app is going to be able to work on the mobile phones.
Tom, it was a big week, not only in terms of IPOs being announced and public being able to get into the nitty-gritty of the details, but also the nitty-gritty of the earnings details coming from the likes of Apple, Facebook. Apple, break it down for us. We saw a significant pop in the shares.
Yeah, absolutely. People were a little concerned. There was questions about the average selling prices for the iPhones. Were people going to go to the lower selling phones? But the iPhone 7, the latest version of the iPhone, did very, very well during that crucial, absolutely, the even higher end of the two. During that critical holiday season, this is where Apple gets a lot of its sales, and they really came through this time around.
Bloomberg's Tom Giles and Sarah Fryer. Now, coming up, we continue to dive into the latest findings from Snap's IPO filing, including the details of its tie-up with Google and why the partnership is listed as a risk. That's next. More now on the biggest social media IPO since Twitter, Snap, of course. Among the details uncovered in the company's filing, a $2 billion deal with Alphabet to use its Google Cloud services. Snap listed its dependency on Google as a key risk factor investors should consider before buying the stock. For more on the complex relationship between the companies, we're joined by Bloomberg Technology reporter Mark Bergen, who covers Alphabet for us, of course. And Mark, so not just a supplier to Snap, but they also see them as a competitor.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Facebook is really like kind of looking in the rearview mirror and kind of rightfully terrified of Snap. And because Snap's really hit this millennial mindset, I think there are people at Google I've talked to that they've thought about this paranoia of what if these millennials don't use email at all, and sort of like there's always this fear that they'll drop their products. And Snap has been developing kind of quietly some search services, and certainly does the thing that there are a lot of their search and activities inside the app. Which is not inside the mobile web where Google makes a bulk of its advertising money. So
fascinating. It's not just perhaps YouTube or Gmail that's under threat for Google, but also a hardware element. We've got to remember we had Google glasses and look at spectacles.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, spectacles come out. It's sort of, you could argue it's been more effective than Google Glass. It's certainly kind of it's been much more of like a fun product, whereas Glass was a lot more serious. And from what I understand, Snap has a lot of ambitions in this world of wearable computing and augmented reality. They're talking about kind of being the software layer for augmented reality, and that's something that Google's invested a lot of money and resources into.
Interesting. So there's the AR front as well. I think what's also fascinating is the limitations that using Google's cloud computing service could put on the regional diversity of Snap. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies are doing kind of diversifying their portfolio. They're putting money with Google, a lot with Amazon, Microsoft. We're not sure at this point. Snap seems to be putting a lot of their money in Google. They were one of the earliest, one of the earliest customers. They're kind of locked in, but there is a potential that they could maybe go over to Amazon. They could develop their own. They've hired a lot of people from Google and AWS that have experience with that. They mentioned China and their S1. There's a market they might be considering going into, or as a potential kind of regulatory risk. Google right now can't operate or doesn't operate its cloud services in China, so that's one area that they might say turn to Amazon for that.
But it's worth remembering, this isn't always that surprising. I remember we always used to have to mention, by the way, before Microsoft really developed its own cloud, it used to use, to a certain extent, Amazon Web Services. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of frenemies within, remember Apple and Samsung relationship.
Right, and I think, and Google also through what's called Capital G, which is their private equity arm, they recently disclosed that they're also investing in Snap.
Oh, wow.
And it's a bit like Uber. Google is Alphabet's one of the biggest investors in Uber, and yet they're also competitors, right? They're both building self-driving cars, they're both doing mapping services. So it's sort of just comes to the territory in Silicon Valley. I doubt that Google is sitting around the boardroom now saying, like, what are we going to do about Snap? Yeah. I don't think they're terrified of it. It's not like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, like these larger existential threats. But it's certainly like an up-and-coming company that they want to keep watching closely.
Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, potentially. Mark, always great to have you on. Thank you for the insights. Mark Bergen, Bloomberg Technology. Now coming up, Super Bowl 51 is this Sunday, and broadcasters are catering to cord cutters. Could this be the future of sports viewing? We'll discuss next. This is Bloomberg. In this edition of Out of This World, the satellite imaging startup Planet Labs is buying Alphabet's satellite unit, Terabella. In return, Alphabet's Google will acquire a stake in Planet and buy satellite images from the company in a multi-year deal. Financial terms were not released, but Google had bought Skybox Imaging for $500 million back in 2014, then changed the name to Terabella. Bloomberg first reported talks between Alphabet and Planet in January. The biggest sporting events of the year is happening this Sunday, Super Bowl 51, and tech will play a big role in the game, not just at the stadium, but also for the millions watching the game around the world. For the first time during NFL broadcast, viewers will have the chance to be the player. Bloomberg's Caitlin Meehan explains.
Imagine what it would be like to step out onto the field for the biggest day on the NFL calendar. Well, imagine no more. Intel is helping viewers get off the armchair and into the arena by equipping Houston's Energy Stadium with 38 5K cameras, each capturing short video clips that, when pieced together, give viewers a 360-degree view of the game.
It's a new video format that allows you to see the plays from any angle, so you can have a virtual camera, not a real camera, that can go anywhere on the field and see the play from all angles.
Intel claims this player perspective technology will revolutionize the experience, and not just on Super Bowl Sunday, but every game. Last year, Intel acquired Tel Aviv startup Replay Technologies for $170 million. It's a company that's familiar not just with football, but basketball and gymnastics. Intel wants to capitalize on this technology and make the experience even more personal for the viewer.
In the future, every fan will have a player in which they can get this video format and see whatever it is they want to see on their own. And they can pick whatever player they want to be the player for.
That was Bloomberg's Caitlin Meehan. Now, sticking with the Super Bowl, television ratings could be an uphill battle for Fox, which is broadcasting the event this year. The February 5th Patriots-Falcons final will need to defy sluggish ratings that have dragged NFL viewership down 13%. Some of this could be due to cord cutting, but Fox is taking a new approach this year, allowing fans to stream the game online for free. Joining us now is DCM Ventures general partner Jason Krikorian. Jason invests in a number of sports streaming services like Fubo TV and Flow Sports. And the mind boggles. Fox is disrupting itself. Why is it doing this for free?
So they obviously pay a lot of money. I don't know exactly what they paid for the rights to the Super Bowl this year, but they pay a lot, and they need to obviously make a lot of money behind it. So one way to think about this is, they go out to advertisers, bring in a lot of dollars, and this is one way just to make sure their advertising inventory is just really expanded, so they can sell into that. They also have Fox Go, which is their online streaming platform, and I'm sure they're viewing this as a way to bring exposure to it for the legions of consumers that probably never heard of it today. CBS actually did the same thing last year. I think they got about 1.4 million viewers. The estimates that I've heard so far for this year peg that number. It could be as high as 10x that, maybe 15 million users watching it over the internet. So it's quite a jump.
But this is sort of whetting the appetite for people to potentially cut the cord, get off cable, stream online. But the companies you invest in charge for the privilege of streaming. Is that the way sports are going to go?
Yeah, I think sports is it's certainly a unique content asset, right? There's no doubt about it. As you look at the over-the-top streaming services these days, they're spending billions of dollars creating original content.
Amazon, Netflix.
Oh, it's crazy, right? And why are they doing it? They're doing it in the hopes that some part of that portfolio will be compelling, right? And will draw people in and hold them in. With sports, you have essentially guaranteed drama, right? That's why you have companies like CBS and Turner with respect to the March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah.
I think that was $9 billion through 2032. It's a long ways away. They know it's going to be compelling. And I think ultimately that's one of the things holding people to their cable packages today. So I think slowly but surely, starting this year, we're going to see more compelling offers through skinny bundles from companies like Fubo TV that really, for the first time, give sports fans national and regional coverage of the sports that they really enjoy, and giving them the freedom to maybe jump away from cable where they haven't done it so far.
I mean, it was interesting. We saw in the United Kingdom, BT, launch an entire TV based upon BT Sports to lure people to getting the whole bundle of internet plus the mobile phone. There's so many ways you can slice and dice this. But will people start demanding more for free?
I think sports has been one of those things that people have, time and time again, been willing to pay for. Whether it is to get access to packages. I mean, the Sunday ticket, the NFL package that DirecTV has had for many years, has really been a hallmark of what drives customers to their service. It's also driven technology purchases. HDTV, I think, was driven in part because people wanted to see sports online. My brother and I created a company called Sling Media. The Sling Box was marketed solely around getting people to watch their sports in just more places, content that they already paid for. So I think there's unending appetite for paying on sports. It also has a massive business model advantage when it comes to the viewing behavior, right? This is the one type of content that people are still watching live. There's no such thing as binge watching sports, so it doesn't happen, right? So for advertising business models, that's good because you're going to watch the ads. You're not skipping through commercials because you're experiencing it live. For services like Netflix, if they were to incorporate sports, it's nice because you're not going to binge watch House of Cards and then churn off of the service maybe to join next year to watch the same thing. So there's an efficiency to sports that's really quite attractive for these guys.
We've only got like 30 seconds. In 5 years' time, will cable still be outbidding over-the-top providers on sport?
I think it's going to go slow, in part because you have these contracts that are multi-year. But I think what you'll see is these bundles, like with Fubo TV, draw more and more users, and they, in and of themselves, will become essentially mini cable companies that there'll at least be other bidders, I think, at the table.
Well, the competition gets even fiercer on and off the pitch. It's been great having you. Thank you so much for spending time with you. Enjoy Sunday as well, of course, from DCM Ventures General Partner Jason Krikorian. Now, that's it from Bloomberg Technology. We are going to be saying goodbye. Enjoy your Sunday. This is Bloomberg.